not particularly high-ranking job at Bear Stearns and wasn't there too long. It seems like he's sort of left under curious circumstances. It's never been totally explained. There was an SEC investigation. He went out, he worked for a while for a guy by the name of Hoffinger, who actually ended up buying the New York Post briefly and then ended up getting indicted in a Ponzi scheme. Not Epstein, but Hoffinger did. And he sort of kicked around and started his own sort of financial advisory business. He had a few clients, but no one really of note. He was always a good salesman, which is sort of always Epstein's story. You know, his big break, as we know, came when he got Les Wexner, the head of L Brands, former head of L Brands, and also founder of Victoria's Secrets as his client. He was a billionaire, and basically, for some reasons, were never totally quite clear. Les Wexner basically signed over this major power of attorney for Epstein to basically manage his entire financial affairs, which is curious when you think like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Which makes absolutely no sense because it wasn't just Les Wexner. Tonight, the Wall Street Journal was reporting that in Epstein's 2003 birthday book, it contained letters from all sorts of big names on Wall Street. And the one that I keep going back to is Leon Black, one of the biggest names, most successful people in the private equity universe. He was also listed under friends in the table of contents. According to the documents that the paper reviewed, again, NBC News hasn't independently reviewed any of this, and a spokesperson for Leon Black declined to comment. No surprise. Explain to us what we know about their relationship, because to me, a man like Leon Black that has unlimited access to the smartest advisors out there, a guy who's worth billions and billions of dollars, pays Jeffrey Epstein $150 million for tax advice he did not need. And mind you, his son is now potentially getting a big role within the Trump administration.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, I give kudos to the Wall Street Journal for, the second part of its scoop tonight. We'll also take credit. We did one of the first stories about Leon Black's extensive ties with Epstein back in 2020. When we stood back then and we found maybe somewhere between $75 and $100 million paid, it ended up being actually, when he was forced to leave Apollo, the big giant private equity firm, he found that it was $158 million. Subsequently, Senator Wyden's office found out it's actually more than $170 million in fees he paid for this tax and advice planning. And, there's never really been a good explanation because, Epstein fancied himself as a tax expert. He knew how to do these things called grats and advise people, but he wasn't particularly skilled. He was a college dropout. He taught math in high school, in a private school. And, basically a lot of what he did when you talk to people is he knew a lot of attorneys and knew a lot of people on Wall Street, and he sort of took their best ideas and sort of repackaged them as his own. The Leon Black story has always been a mystery, and partly because, one can argue $170 million to Leon Black is worth $14 billion is a rounding error. And I know Black has said at times that basically he lost count of how much he was paying Epstein for the advice. I think
can I just interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't matter if you're somebody who's worth $14 billion, you specialize in knowing exactly where your money goes. So the idea that he lost count, brother, please, because you're so good at counting money is how you made so much.
I agree with you. I'm telling you what he said. I'm not saying I totally agree with that. Which is part of the reason why Senator Wyden's office began its investigation after to figure out what was the advice you actually were getting and why were you paying so much. And I can tell you, Wyden's, now come out in information about all the money the banks were directing to Epstein, but there's never been a good explanation for the nature of the advice. And I think one explanation I will argue is that Leon and Jeffrey Epstein were really very good friends. And, it's interesting that in the journal story, they're listed as friends. I mean, I can tell you that in the later years, Leon was over there quite a bit. He would come over for breakfast, come over for dinner. They were really good pals, or at least from Leon's perspective, they were good pals. And I don't know if this is some sort of Part of the Epstein story is the mystery about why all these powerful people and celebrities were attracted to him. If you strip aside the whole issue, and I'm not minimizing the girls and the women, that's still a mystery why so many powerful people would want to hang out with this guy. I don't buy the story just that he was so charismatic. I think it's sort of the trappings of power and the allure that attracts a certain kind of segment of society. When they see lots of other rich people hanging out there, they feel like I need to be there too. And it's, I mean, it's the same thing like, we recently reported about Peter Thiel. That Epstein actually invested a sizable amount of money with some of Peter Thiel's venture capital funds. And now those investments have actually, for Epstein's estate, they're worth about $170 million, which is a phenomenal return. So I guess kudos to Peter Thiel for that. But again, it's like, why is Peter Thiel seeking out money from Jeffrey Epstein? Why is JP Morgan filing a suspicious activities report after Epstein dies for $1.1 billion worth of transactions? The numbers are just astounding. Wyden's office came up that the banks altogether, 4 banks, is $1.5 billion in transactions that they targeted. And that's only over like a 10 to 13 year period. And Epstein was doing this for about 20 to 30 years. So I think it's a good chance the total dollar value of all the money that Epstein was moving around is about $2 billion. And to me, it's just mind-boggling. This could have gone on for so long, and no one blew the whistle. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see something weird is going on here, because these numbers are just phenomenal and they're extraordinary. And we're talking about at times he would be taking out $1 million a day in cash transactions. I mean, I think if you have a good answer, Stephanie, I think anyone, it's just, I know, because it's really hard to explain.
All for an advisory business, and we don't know exactly what he was advising on, but we're going to keep asking the questions. Matt, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.